bunch of nutrition stuff, okay? Like questions. First he'll talk about some format and some real structure. So principles are always first here, right? And this is what we can learn, here because of my and his and guys I'll bring in history in the industry. We can easily look at a protocol and say, yeah, that's fine. It's not what we do, but it's fine because it's got principles behind it, right? And that's where we talked about craftsman, technician, artist. The artist can produce his own system, right? Because he understands the principles. And the Dr. Serranos, the Pulikins, the Paul Checks, these guys that were my leaders and mentors, they created systems, and no matter what domain, whether it's biomechanics, regular medicine, endocrinology, internal medicine, whether it was structural stuff, sports performance at the Olympic level, you go through anybody that say, yeah, that's a sound program right there. They say, yeah, that's a great nutrition program right there. They'd see the principles within it, so everybody respected what they did. Some say, yeah, I like applying the principles a little differently, but these guys were working with a lot of our athletes and a lot of athletes for years. So, and even the Gen Pop, the executive guy, the mom, like getting them lean and healthy is something we want to talk about too. So I'll take it away.
So one of the interesting things we were discussing yesterday is back in 2020 when Scott tried the 21-day fat cell cleanse, which was 3 weeks, right, 21 days. But then we made adjustments during the second phase and the third phase. So it's interesting, something I try and get across to people all the time is you have to make strategic changes, otherwise things are going to get stale, just like your training blocks, right? So what do we have to work with? We have meal frequency. We have the lengths of fasted periods. We can macronutrient cycle in terms of rotating the amounts of carbohydrate, dietary fats, and proteins. So there's a lot of things that we can do. However, in a lot of cases, people get very intellectually lazy with their nutrition plans, and they want to be very robotic, eat the same things over and over, because they think that's right. Well, might as well stick with it. However, as I mentioned, it gets stale. So in Scott's case, and this has been a frequent program that I've used when someone's trying to reduce body fat, maintain their muscle mass, and have a high quality of life, 21-day fat cell cleanse, 0 carbohydrate, using some flexible fasting protocols, high protein, high dietary fat, relatively high calorie, as well for 3 weeks. Unlimited amount of green vegetables, the idea being trying to transition someone to using more stored fat as fuel, optimizing insulin levels, helping the digestive system recover by removing a lot of food allergens and refined foods. Then use 1 day of a relatively high carbohydrate intake, which is actually very effective for fat burning, in that it's very anabolic in nature, helps to lower cortisol, helps to optimize thyroid. And then you can repeat that cycle as many times as you want, without it getting stale. But in Scott's case, we started to add some carbohydrate post-training during his second phase, and he felt that was a better balance, for him. So it's not always about being in ketosis or a ketogenic plan. That's not as important as people would think as it relates to body fat loss. I do think plans that are lower in carbohydrate in general and focusing carbohydrate post-training are a lot more effective for fat burning than many others, out there. The more often you eat, the more conscious you have to be of your caloric intake, because fasting changes the game in many respects as it relates to thermodynamics, in my opinion. A nutritionist would say I'm crazy. I would tell them they're wrong, in terms of what my observations have been. So that's one advantage of fasting. Someone using 2 meals a day, for example, within like a 6 or 8 hour window is a lot less sensitive to caloric intake in my experience. Any questions that came up from yesterday, anything we discussed? No. So looking at that, someone's going to use the 21-day fat cell cleanse, day 22 carb load, I would say someone could repeat that anywhere between 6 to 8 times if they have a lot of body fat to lose, get pretty lean relatively quickly without being hungry, without being, hell on wheels in terms of just having a low quality of life and so forth. Scott also said there are some questions about youth athletes who are training twice a day, like technical work on the ice and then weight training, right? So give me a schedule for one of them, and I can show you what I would do in general. Are they skating at 10 a.m. and lifting at 3, or what's it like?
Yeah, I would say.
Are we talking figure or hockey, by the way? They both fight, but a little different.
Yeah. Let's say hockey.
All right.
These kids, they'll lift, hockey and figure skating, because figure skaters will skate in the morning and then lift with us in the afternoon.
I say inverse, yeah.
And then the hockey will get in here like early afternoon, like 2 or 3,
Uh-huh.
and then they're on the ice till 7.
They're here at 2 or 3 for an hour.
Yeah, for an hour.
Okay. 1:30 for them, assuming they've had lunch somewhere around midday. Are they going to school?
Yeah.
Okay. So assuming they've had lunch midday, I'm using 100% MR and muscle synthesis powder, pre-workout, 2 scoops of each, to accelerate recovery of the nervous system, to provide an alternative energy source, to increase lean body mass. And that combination is very easily dealt with, digested, and so forth. Some having to do that with water, and as much water as they can drink, the better, because a lot of them don't drink enough. And, then they're getting ready to skate and drop a ton. So if they're doing that, then they're finished at 3. I'm going to have them again use the 100% MR and the muscle synthesis powder. And you get this question from parents. Some are going to be more cooperative than others. What's the difference between this? So I can go to GNC and buy this for $10. Well, go do that. Because if you can't recognize that there's a difference in terms of, a scientifically engineered blend of what we did with a physician doing real trials on patients and determining how it affected body comp performance, then you're just not listening. So the ratios make all the difference. I think there's too great a reliance on the protein powders, which are too little, too late, pre and post workout. It takes a long time to digest them. As I mentioned yesterday, the whey becomes an irritant for a lot of these kids where they can't eat other meals because their stomach's so screwed up. But that's what they've been introduced to, and it's easy and it tastes good, so they're just constantly drinking that. So I find that the 100% MR and the muscle synthesis powder are tolerated very well by everybody. So I would do that again post. And then they get on the ice at what time?
5 or 6.
5 or 6. So at 4 o'clock, I'd have them eat something that's relatively easy to digest. My guess for them that's most practical, they could get some organic beef jerky. There's a brand called Chomps. They sell it at Trader Joe's and all the major stores. It tastes pretty good. And combine that with some raw nuts that they would rotate. Very calorically dense. How much should they eat? A lot. I mean, you're burning a lot of calories. The calories from lunch, depending on what they're doing, may not be very high quality. So I would rotate between, let's say, cashews, pistachios, almonds, Brazil nuts, whatever, but no soybean oil, no canola oil. Salt is okay, but you don't want any added oil stuff. Some of them, if they're leaner, can get away with like one of the dried fruit mixed with it. They sell those too. That's fine for a lot of them also. Unless they need to lose body fat, then I would be careful with that. Then they should digest that pretty well, and they're on the ice when, at 5 o'clock, you said?
So no starchy carbohydrates or fat-acting carbs before.
But where are they going to get it? Like right here, that's the thing. Do they have any food at this?
No.
Right, so that's my thinking. Yeah. If the parents are going to prep the meals and bring them, great, but they're not. Yeah. Right, I mean, that's my thinking. They could use regular fruit, too. I mean, these kids have seen an apple before. They could do that. But I find that you got to make it convenient so they can do it consistently. I'm not a big fan of a lot of bars, especially the ones that have whey. But there are bars called Perfect Bars, which are a peanut-based bar, but I don't know if there's allergy restrictions here. Like, you can't bring them to school. They have an almond version. There's some other probably bars that are decent. Cliff Bar is a little bit too high in carbohydrate for my taste, but there's another one I'm not thinking of. So a nut-based bar or a date-based bar could be good, for a lot of them. And then, after that, I'd be making sure they got a pretty significant dinner. And that's got to be a gradual process depending on where they're starting. You got to be realistic in terms of what they consume. I like 1/3 protein, 1/3 fat, 1/3 carbohydrate. How do they know? They don't. Send me pictures. I'll tell you what we need to shift around. So things like rice or potatoes, any kind of lean protein source, and then dietary fats they can add, olive oil, avocado. These are all very easy things, for the parents, to do. And I would do that. And then probably, if I could, I'd have them eat leftovers again sometime in the evening. You know, depending on, you know, I was talking about this yesterday. For a lot of these guys, when you raise their caloric intake, they lose body fat.
Yeah.
And they gain muscle. You know, but some of them are just, they're so under their needs in general that they're just all screwed up, and they're overtraining and, you know, whatever other stressors they have going on.
So are you looking first, you know, obviously there's things to look at. There's calories, protein, fats, and carbs. We want to regulate blood sugar, but we also want to fill the cells with glycogen, fill the cells with fatty acids, fill the cells with amino acids, right?
Yeah.
They can perform well and recover.
Yeah, and I would argue that their glycogen replenishment's going to be better when they're eating enough food and they're eating quality carbohydrate sources. Yeah. I mean, there may be some literature that says, well, that drinking Gatorade, you know, by itself, you know, after workout's good for glycogen replenishment. It's possible, but I find that it creates other problems. The blood sugar goes up and down. They, you know, drink, you know, a sports drink before, you know, a practice. Well, then they need to keep sipping it, otherwise their blood sugar is crashing all the time, and, you know, that's not a really good cycle either.
So foundationally, you've got, you know, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then
Couple snacks.
and then you've got also, this is where it gets overwhelming for kids and athletes.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got, I mean, I'm a believer in breakfast, lunch, and dinner, unless you're just a fitness person wanting to maybe do some fasting or something like that, right? But really a good breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then you've got to add in the pre and post, and then possibly another snack I can get in there, right?
Yeah, I think a late afternoon snack's real important, assuming they're eating lunch around 12. In this example, you know, they're lifting at 3.
Yeah.
They're done at 3, try and get a snack, then on the ice at 5. You know, dinner at, 7 or 8? How long are they on the ice for?
2 hours.
So, you know, dinner at 8, maybe they can eat something again at 10.
Yeah.
What's a good lunch that we could encourage, like, the parents to pack? 'Cause I feel like it's
Leftovers from dinner. Leftovers from dinner, that's the easiest thing. So whatever you're making the kid for dinner, make extra, pack it for their lunch, make them eat it. I don't know around here what the schools serve. Nationwide, I deal with people in different areas. It's typically not the best. There's good and bad choices. Some places, sometimes they're going for
We're going
down.
to start with breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Are you thinking isocaloric or iso? So you're thinking 33% of protein, carbs, and fats in each one.
And if they're a little off,
Yeah. No, but
it's not going to
in
be
that
good.
range.
Yeah, I think that's simple. I think there are some natural inclinations that support that. I think it's an easy way to eat.
Yeah.
You know,
So not going protein, carb meals, protein, fat meals.
for a youth athlete,
Or even a high school athlete, not necessarily.
if they need to lose body fat, or there's some kind of extenuating circumstance, possibly. But I think that's a smaller percentage. I think once you get the good fundamentals in with a lot of these youth athletes, a lot of things correct themselves because they're young. They got good hormones going on.
You
You
make them
know,
healthy, they're going to perform here.
Yeah.
You get them with healthy habits and make healthier.
yeah. You find that some of them that are chronically hurt, you know, that could be a combination. Their training's not right. They're constantly inflamed. Sometimes when you improve their diet, they'll have less nagging issues too. Sometimes they're deficient in certain things, essential fats and so
how
forth.
do you set, like, we've got, you know, a 145-pound hockey boy, 15-year-old hockey player, and a 175, 80-pound hockey player coming in?
I want the 175-pound kid to eat 20% more than the other kid at least.
So do you do it just by portion control, or you don't add calories? Because calorie counting is, like, tough to do.
I think it's hard for them to implement it, but what I'm looking to do with any of them is get them based to start seeing the pictures and say, hey, can you make that a little bit bigger? Can you add this? You're a little off here and there, and keep pushing that to where eventually they're eating a lot more because gradually they're handling more of the portions.
So but for us, for a guideline to look at a plate for 180-pound, 16-year-old, or we've got a 15-year-old, how Tyler, how
He was 190.
190, right? And we got 15-year-old,
140.
how much hardly?
140, yeah.
140. So without going through a TDEE, calorie count, like all that kind of thing, we're going to go ISO, you know, kind of ISO macros. Yeah.
So let's see here. That's 160 calories, 90, 180, 360, right? So that's how much? 360?
Yes, 700 calories.
That's a good place to start them. And, you know, this is...
For the bigger kid.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, okay, so now you got the 140-pounder. How do you kind of, you know,
Maybe 30, 30, 30.
Got it. So you're just playing with those numbers.
I got to see what they can tolerate,
Yeah.
you know, because if you give them too much food to begin with,
Yeah, it's a good way to do it.
then they're
Definitely
intimidated by it.
Yeah. Then they won't eat the next meal, things like that. So going 30 grams, 25, you know what I mean? Start playing with that, right? Say, okay,
And this is going to be foreign to them, that much dietary fat added. And you know what the other thing too is? You're going to be more calories in that because in the protein, I'm not counting the dietary fat in that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't, you know, that's the least of their worries. So actually, we're a little bit higher on the fat scale, so we'll probably be closer.
You know, almond butter, olive oil, just avocado.
Avocado, yeah, add it to the food.
So I know you and Doc Serrano have been talking a lot about monounsaturated fats being the one you find that's like the biggest. You out of here? All right, I'll see you. Yeah. The biggest discrepancy, like, or the biggest maybe imbalance. So
They're probably lacking monounsaturated fat more so than others. They're getting too much polyunsaturated fat, which is, you know, not ideal for them, and stuff that's fried and so forth, or trans fats. So yeah, extra virgin olive oil from a dark bottle or can is ideal, and you know, and they can add a lot to it. Some of the kids I've worked with can, you know, just take down 3 or 4 tablespoons at a meal.
yeah.
It's not hard, just drink it.
Well, even if you mix it with a dressing,
Yes.
they can really.
And if you find a salad dressing, you know, that they can use, no canola, no soybean oil, no grapeseed oil, none of that. And if they like it, they can add that to their food. That's an easy way to do it too. That's fine.
So if we had a list of really good, these leaner proteins typically, or moderate fat, or
I'm going to want to use higher fat, higher saturated from organic sources if I can, at all the meals with the exception of the one post-training I might want to go a little bit leaner for faster absorption.
It's very important what he just said, okay? I mean, so probably because the fats, great for the brain, great for inflammation, right? Even saturated fats, great for hormones. So breakfast and dinner, depending when they train, right?
Yes.
If you're going to do more of a moderate fat, more of a steak, more of a New York strip, or things like that, versus a sirloin, which is a little leaner, right? If you're going to add that stuff, I think it's almost critical that it has to be grass-fed organic, because the fats in commercial meat, very bad. It doesn't even, if you do a chemical analysis, you think it was 2 different things that you're looking at right there. So encourage those meals. Now, and then post-workout, a leaner meat, turkey, chicken,
Eggs, seafood, wild caught preferably.
Yeah.
And on the grass-fed beef, ground, what do you call it? Beef patty or whatever, you know, ground up. What am I talking about? A pound or 2 of the ground beef, the grass-fed ground beef, pretty inexpensive.
Yeah.
Grass-fed hot dogs, hamburgers, pretty inexpensive.
So do you source? This is another thing. Sourcing these food sources.
Trader Joe's is good.
He likes Trader Joe's. Do you like wellness meat stuff?
Yes. That's where I get my stuff from for the steaks and so forth. I thought it's
wellnessmeats.com.
yeah, very good.
It's a very good grass-fed farm.
They're in Missouri. The guy that runs it, they're very good with that. You know, they're not using any hormones or antibiotics, and that's one of the problems with the commercially raised beef is they want to make those cows fatter at auction. They're giving them estrogen.
Yeah.
You don't want that.
And concrete.
Yeah, concrete chips. They give them cement chips with water before they go to the auctions because it makes them heavier quickly. They get more money per pound. That's it.
You're eating that.
Right.
You're eating that.
Right.
Box good, same thing.
I'm not familiar with it, but probably.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of places where you can order from that are good. Yeah.
On a monthly grass-fed delivery.
Probably very good. Probably very good. But yeah, if you can get the youngsters to do that, I think they'll earn progress faster. Cage-free eggs are good
We're going to
too.
look at 160, 170, 180, maybe go 25, 30, 35, 40,
Yeah.
40. Start looking at 40 grams of carbs.
See how it goes.
See how it goes.
Gradually increase. Get some buy-in with them. They feel like, okay, I can do this. If you can tell, the parent, hey, try and bump up their portions, see if they'll finish it. That helps too with the parents. Just serve them a little more. You know what I mean? And look, you're going to have some kids that naturally are going to develop a very good appetite, which is great. That makes your life a lot easier. But that's hard.
Breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Mm-hmm.
And then snack ideas. That's just, you don't want to measure that. Someone just say, hey, have some beef jerky and some nuts. Have some.
Like a Chomp's beef jerky maybe has 10, 12 grams of protein maybe.
Yeah.
2, 3, 4 of those maybe.
Yeah.
but a big heap of nuts, and if you want to add some like dried fruit mix to that, that'll get them to eat more.
What about like cottage cheese or yogurt?
If they tolerate dairy well, absolutely. Yeah.
With some almond butter in it mixed in.
Good. Yeah, good way to get some calories.
And an apple or something like that, or berries.
Yep. Fruit's good. I mean, anything they can eat that's non-refined
Yeah.
is in general going to be better.
For a snack.
Is Greek yogurt or just normal yogurt? What kind of?
I think either one. But I'd mix up the flavors,
Yeah.
keep them interested. But what percentage of the population responds well to dairy and what doesn't, I don't know. But there are quite a few, as I mentioned to Scott, that once they start getting some dairy, it screws up their stomach. They won't eat the rest of the meals. They just don't feel good. Well, you got to cut that shit out. It just doesn't agree with you. It's just the way it goes.
And okay, now let's talk about the pre and post workout.
Okay.
So you touched on RMS by that special.
Yeah, so the 100% MR is this one. 100% MR is a scientifically engineered blend of branched chain, glutamine, B complex vitamins, and taurine. And the ratios were developed by Dr. Serrano based on a lot of years of his research with patients, professional athletes, other athletes being part of the patient population. The sole purposes are to accelerate recovery of the muscles as well as the nervous system. So when we're talking athletes, I always like to ask them, do you feel sharp on the ice, at the plate? Do you feel mentally sharp? Does your vision feel good? Do you feel energetic? If not, your nervous system is not recovering well. The nervous system does not fully recover until the muscles do. So when you have these youth athletes or professional athletes, they're practicing on a daily basis, they're lifting, they're competing each week, it's taking a lot out of them, they have recovery issues. Now they can learn to cope, especially if they're really talented, but they're going to gain a better result if they can accelerate recovery of the muscles with all of their sessions.
And what accelerates muscle recovery?
What?
Because we know sleep,
Yeah.
well, muscle, but also very nervous system recovery is sleep, right? Hydration.
And what's one of the signs of overtraining? Difficulty sleeping. So there's some issues there. So the ratio he developed, we found, does a great job of lowering catabolic hormones, keeping them in check, accelerating recovery of the muscles. By virtue of that, when the body knows the muscles are recovering quickly, it can then dedicate more resources to helping the nervous system recover, which is where that hand-eye coordination becomes very sharp, thinking, competitiveness too. I mean, if you've ever been around an athlete that's overtrained, and I've been there, you just don't feel like competing. You don't feel sharp. There's a confidence issue. There's a lot of issues there.
Which is a lot of times too, B vitamins being low. Burned up the B vitamins, that's why they added B vitamins.
And then the muscle synthesis powder is a proprietary free-form amino acid combination. For these youth athletes, it's going to provide the perfect combination of raw materials the muscles need to grow. It will also help with the utilization of stored fat as fuel, improving the ratio of muscle to fat as well. So,
okay, so let's talk about that. Because you've got the BCAAs, the branched chain, which everybody, you hear BCAAs.
A lot.
But very limited. And what people think BCAAs are going to help with muscle growth, all these kids taking you're going to do your BCAAs and your whey protein. So BCAAs are really for recovery, right?
I think that's where they are best for recovery, and they will not help with muscle growth. They will help to prevent muscle loss.
Yeah. So they kind of stop that muscle loss, keep mTOR high, like all that stuff, right? They should only really promote muscle growth. They stop the catabolic and they help recovery. Now, what about the free form?
The free-form amino acids in the right ratios are going to help drive muscle growth. So think of it this way. My muscles are training during a training session. I'm pumping a lot of blood in my muscles. I'm activating fibers. That's a good thing. So when I can deliver the 100% MR in the muscle synthesis powder with water, they're able to get to the muscles very quickly because they bypass digestion. Protein shake, too little, too late, right? It's got to be digested. That draws blood away from the muscles into the stomach. Not ideal. You want to keep that blood flow in the muscles. You want to keep that pump, so to speak. So having the right ratios of raw materials, get to where they need to go quickly, is going to give you the best odds to grow muscle quickly.
And so explain free-form amino acids. Is it the same as essential EAAs? Or?
Yeah, they can be classified similarly. And the way I like to explain it is this. Like, there's different amino acids that send different signals for different things. Okay? So the 100% MR concentrating on recovery, performance, preventing muscle loss. The muscle synthesis purely focuses on body composition and improving it. And there are some synergies when taking them together. And how are these developed? Based on a lot of trial and error. I mean, Dr. Serrano had, he still has, he has 7,500 patients in the practice now, I think. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot. And an outsized number of those patients happen to be professional athletes, not thousands, but many that come to see him. Bodybuilders, powerlifters, some of the best powerlifters in the world, I've seen him. A lot of recreational athletes, a lot of collegiate high school athletes, let's call them executives, fitness enthusiasts. So he did a lot of trial and error in terms of testing different ratios to see what worked best, tracking the body composition, looking at the hormones, right? And that's how he arrived at the specific formulas. It took a long time to do that.
So freeform versus branch chain, that's why they're both there. That's why the
Right.
combination is useful for
Right.
promoting muscle growth,
Right.
and recovery, and promoting.
Right. Another thing he did too that was interesting is he did muscle biopsies.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
That's not a fun process, but the muscle biopsies taught him a lot about what's the actual composition of the muscle. How do I replicate that in a way that'll replenish it when it's broken down?
Yeah, he would actually chemically break down, take a biopsy, break it down to find out what this muscle really made of. This fiber, hamstring, quad, bicep, what
Yeah.
is it really made of?
And there's some
What
sense.
are amino acids?
Right. So if we take a biopsy, perhaps from the hamstring, more fast twitch versus the calf, so he did all kinds of stuff,
Yeah.
with that. But that was an important part of the process too, to determine what do the muscles need and when.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go through the 2-a-day skate, train.
So
They're
they,
eating breakfast, lunch, dinner, and they got that one snack
Mhm.
before they go on the ice for the first time. Or whatever.
Mhm.
Let's just talk about that again. Some of our kids skate, come right in and train. Some skate, have a 2 or 3 hour block, and they train.
if they're going to skate and go right in and lift,
Yeah.
what would be ideal is 100% MR and muscle synthesis powder 30 minutes before the skate,
30 minutes before. Yeah.
right after the skate, which leads them right into here, and then right after the lift.
Okay.
And what I tell parents is this: you're putting a kid in a challenging situation with that much intense training in a very small window. It may be efficient for their schedule, but there's going to be a lot of recovery demands created for that. So you've got to address them, right? So that's what I would do there. So you've got it bracketing the entire session. That's going to result in much better performance, faster recovery. I think it reduces the risk of a lot of fatigue-related injuries, that accumulate as well.
Would you add honey in the second workout?
If it's somebody that is trying to gain lean body mass, definitely. Yeah, I would use some raw honey and maybe a tablespoon or two and add it to the solution with water. Tastes pretty good.
Yeah.
But honey is really good for glycogen replenishment. It's got a lot of anabolic properties. It's a really good source of carbohydrate. Raw honey, not with any like high fructose corn syrup or anything added like that. You have to check when you look at the labels.
When, before they're on the ice? Or?
You could. I think after is more important, but if it's somebody, I could do it at all three of those.
Yeah.
A little bit. You can't tolerate a lot. You can't
So you want them doing it before ice, after ice, and then after the
If there's somebody having a very hard time keeping weight on, yes, all three. If they're trying to gain lean body mass, probably I'd focus it post. But actually, if they could tolerate it all three of those times,
The drink, all three. The drink, they should have amino acids 30 minutes before, because what we want to do is not only use that water, so not only, here's the 4 things we really want to do pre-competition, pre-training. 1, we want to make sure the cells are hydrated. Okay, we're mixing that in 20-something ounces of water, right? And then 30 minutes before, so at least we're making sure, okay, at least we're protecting ourselves when we're drinking water before that. 2, we want to make sure amino acid the cells are topped off with amino acids. That's the second most important thing, hydration. Third, we do want to make sure there's glycogen. With the way they probably eat, they probably got enough glycogen in there.
it should be.
Should be, right? And then fourth, we want to do all 3 of those things without upsetting the stomach and getting too much blood flow to the stomach. So yeah, could we get amino acids in them 30 minutes before by getting them a steak and potatoes? Sure, it'll slowly drip in there, but how much blood flow is going to the stomach for digestion, out of the legs, out of the shoulders, out of the torso? We don't want that. We want that blood flow in here, right? So that's why you have to do those 3 things: hydration, amino acids, and glycogen, without bloating and upsetting the stomach. And that's why the drink is easily digest, tastes great, right? And knocks all those stones off, right? Like those boxes it knocks off. So.
And no sluggishness either.
Yeah.
Interesting, you find a lot of athletes that'll say, I don't eat before training because otherwise I feel sluggish.
Yeah.
So they've gotten in the habit because they don't want to feel
Is that a blood
sluggish.
sugar issue probably? Or
I think it's a food allergy issue.
Food allergy issue.
I think they're eating shit that irritates them.
Yeah.
So what do? Not eat anything because they don't know what's irritating them.
Yeah.
So that's where they need to kind of look at what do we rotate in.
So what about for competition, like I was just asking Katie, for example, and I'm sure that all the skaters have a similar layout, what a competition day looks like, and she said that pretty much early in the day they have their 20-30 minute warm-up, and then they have like how it could be an hour, it could be 4 hours, and then they get 6 minutes before they go on to kind of warm up again, but she's like, it doesn't really do much, and then we compete. So what would that look like for skaters?
So in other words, they don't know when they're coming up.
I mean, they will the day of, but sometimes between the 20 minutes that they get on the ice or the 30 minutes, there's a bunch of hours.
I mean, I think in general, I would try and eat the best they can predict 2 to 3 hours before competition, so they're not hungry during competition. And that better be something they can tolerate well, so there needs to be some experimentation.
I wouldn't give any food, hard food, like 90 minutes before. I'd say, that'd be the minimum cutoff, 90 minutes before competition. Anything before, past that critical point would be liquid.
Yeah. And it has to be things they tolerate well. So for example, they're on the road, they go to a certain hotel, and for whatever reason, some of their food choice is a little different. You decide to try something new that day, not a good idea. Try and stick with something you know you will digest well.
So what about a situation where they've got, a practice, especially pre-competition, or even here, really early in the morning? So you're not going to get before and eat a breakfast because you're practicing at 6.
Now, I would use the 100% MR in the muscle synthesis pre and post, and then I would eat after. Breakfast after. I think you're right. It's unrealistic when they get up at 4 and do that. I would probably use GCX10 in that case too. I think that would help a lot.
And then should they do the 100% MR and the muscle synthesis like 30 minutes before they go compete?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. And right after, so they can recover for, 2 days later they can run again. If they recover now, they can practice better tomorrow.
The faster the recovery, the better their technical work and explosiveness is going to be. I'm not a figure skating expert by any means. I mean, I think I've helped a few. But what they do is very technical and explosive. I mean, it's hard, so they've got to be very, very sharp.
Yeah.
There's a small difference between landing one of those moves and wiping out.
Yeah. Now we've kind of got, let's talk about the alpha mega a little bit, and then transfer a little bit into adults.
Okay.
Like the difference between an adult.
Nutrition for adult-wise?
Yeah,
okay.
Because obviously they all want to recover, they want to sleep well, they want to reduce stress, they want to be lean.
Okay.
Everybody wants to be leaner and strong.
Okay.
We need the other team to lead before he starts talking about that.
Yeah. Only people on our composition team can do this. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Alpha omega M3, very unique in that it is a combination of essential fats. Whenever you bring up essential fats or fish oil, people assume it's just EPA or DHA, which is fish oil. So this is EPA and DHA that are toxin filtrated, but also has CLA, GLA, ALA, vitamin E, avocado oil, extra virgin olive oil, and flaxseed oil. And what Dr. Serrano discovered is the combination of the essential fats in the right ratios have the great impact on body composition, on joint health, on brain function. Does a really good job of reducing cravings for carbohydrate. I think that's because it satisfies the brain. So it works in a lot of unique ways. Though, as far as athletes go, when they use 3 of these twice a day with their meals, they're going to process the carbohydrate better. They're going to have better peaked insulin sensitivity. They're going to have better glycogen replenishment because the ratios do a very good job of macronutrient partitioning in terms of driving the carbohydrates to be replenished in the muscles. That we've seen very consistently.
So during Christmas, I double up on that stuff, and I have less blood sugar. I'm eating Christmas cookies.
So I'm
celebrating.
For the adult population, I talk about that a lot. We have billions of fat cells. We're born with billions. We can get more from eating the wrong things. Trans fats, foods fried in corn oil can expand the size, can proliferate more. But we can't get rid of them once we have them. So one of the strategies we use is to use a high dose of the alpha omega M3, let's say three times a day, or even 12, right? And we want to saturate the cells with all the good stuff in there so they'll purge out the larger crap. As a result, when those cells collectively shrink in size, that's one of the important ways that we lower body fat levels quickly, but also build a shield in terms of keeping those levels low over the long term. Is when the cells are satisfied, they're a lot less likely to suck up garbage in the bloodstream, even when food choices are far less than perfect, right?
So think about, you get an adult client, what are the main things you want to do? is I want to cleanse their fat cell. I want
Yep.
to get the bad stuff out, because the bad fats that are stored and stuff that are stored in that fat cells function. They send messages
Yep.
to the brain, the neurotransmitters, right? They communicate like crazy, right? We want to flush that stuff out with water and pumping great stuff, great fats in them. Now they'll have great raw material in the cell, great fatty acids, GLA, EPA, DHA, all that stuff will be in there. You're going to get a highly functioning body.
They'll feel better fairly quickly. They'll feel better, their inflammation will be lower, they'll have more likely to make better food choices, to want to train. There's a lot of distinct impacts when you're correcting those deficiencies.
Flushing those out takes, obviously cleaning up their diet and getting on.
And it does, and what was their diet before? So for example, if someone's eating a lot of refined foods have preservatives, which are designed to do what? To extend the shelf life of food. Well, when they get into the cells, they're very sticky. They're hard to get rid of, because that's what they're meant to do. So, how long does it take to cleanse someone's fat cells? I mean, it can take a while. It can be an ongoing thing depending on where they started. So, but I think it's an ongoing thing that people need to take care of those cells for a lot of reasons in terms of their cellular health. Like you mentioned too, the communication between cells is very intricate, right? We want them sending the right messages. When they're communicating well, when their raw material status is good, they want to be in a mode to burn fat as opposed to store it. When they're confused, they're storing fat like crazy. And for most people, they're largely confused.
Okay, going through a diet layout.
For an adult.
Especially initially, and then take it into someone that's moving forward. So initially, we get a brand new, executive guy or housewife in here,
Okay.
mom of a hockey player, who's soft, needs strength, needs muscle, needs a lot of muscle tissue, needs some body fat, and sleep better and have more energy. Like that's what they're all going to ask for. Better sleep, less stress, more energy, less body fat, stronger functionally, better mentally.
So here's an interesting one. You say less stress.
Yeah.
While we can't probably lower their stress in their life, we can improve how the body responds to it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the ways that many of these adult population who are highly stressed are going to respond to stress is eating more and seeking out more carbohydrate to increase serotonin levels, which is a natural soothing thing. I think alcohol has that effect for a lot of people as well. So we need to take that into account in terms of how we structure things. So we need to be realistic with them. But when you can create the body's better, more favorable response to stress, people are a lot more likely to be consistent with what they're doing. And they have to learn to use some different outlets for their stress rather than reaching for alcohol or other things. But in general, things that I like. Rule 1, eliminate refined foods. I cannot see any argument why any adult or youth or child or whatever should be consuming refined foods if they want to improve their body composition, their quality of life. Way I explain it to a lot of people, our digestive systems, as Paul Chek would say, have not evolved very much over the last 10,000 years. So bread is not something our system recognizes very well. There are some people in the population that can eat whatever they want and have no problems. Well, guess what? That's not you. Because if it was, we wouldn't be here talking. I tell people that very often. And sometimes that sets off a trigger to say, listen, you do not have the genetics to get away with whatever you want. Okay? So
It's very rare to find someone like that. Ignore those people. Don't use them as examples.
Right. They're an outlier. They're an outlier. So, and that's okay. I mean, that's not like they're doing anything wrong, but that's, when you're zeroing in on that to explain that to somebody. So when I eliminate refined foods, that's an important step. Not too focused on calories. I want to, first and foremost, change the ratios of the proteins, the dietary fats, the carbohydrates. And I want it.
Falls under BLG right now. Okay, see what he's going? He's going right to just basic lifestyle guidelines.
Yes.
How's your food hygiene? Where are you sourcing your food? Right? What's your water intake? See, he's going right to that before he goes into macros and fuel and then gets that right before he goes to blood work.
Right. So, looking at the person, what is their personality type will tell you how specific you can get how soon without overwhelming them. Right? This just with, changing up the food sources alone and doing some of these fundamental things, they're going to feel better very quickly. They're going to give you a lot of buy-in. Yes?
Just like how how would you go about explaining to an adult, let's say they knew absolutely nothing about nutrition, here's refined foods that you might be eating that you could easily eliminate, or here's how to stay away.
Like what are refined foods?
Yeah, like how would you go about easily just putting into like super simple steps, here's things you can do to eliminate them?
If it comes out of a box, or let's reverse the trend. What are things we can eat? Things that were once living, right? Animals, fish, birds, right? Want to focus on that, and other things existing in nature. So you're right. Don't focus so much on what they can eat. What can they eat? And you want to give them lists so they understand what they fall under. You could provide a basic list. What are protein sources? What are dietary fat sources? What are carbohydrate sources for you to focus on? You know, because one of the first things that a lot of people say, well, you want me to eat fish, like which one? I'm going to get sick of tuna really quick. Well, there happens to be a lot of fish you can choose from, you know.
In case anyone's asking, grass-fed bison, organic broccoli with some macadamia nut oil and almond butter, just in case you're asking.
That's good. So I focus on what they can eat.
Or those alpha omegas.
And then I'm going to put some serious thought into how are they responding, what's the best course in terms of macronutrient percentages. Look, if somebody says, I've got to get ready for a wedding in 6 weeks, I'm going to take advantage of that. I'm going to say, okay, we're going to be very aggressive while you're highly motivated, and probably I'll use some flexible fasting, and I will use carbohydrate restriction, and I will focus on, you know, a high intake of green vegetables, unlimited, and high dietary fat, high protein. And I'm going to see how that goes, and I'm going to make refinements accordingly. Big mistakes people make, as I mentioned earlier. Staying on the same diet for too long. It gets stale. Other big mistakes, subconsciously not eating enough. That's why if I see the pictures of the meals, I can catch that early. Like, look, this isn't enough. We need to recalibrate. You need to eat more. You'll start, you know, gaining more benefit, you know, from there. But you don't know what you don't know. So that's why I like, getting the pictures is very helpful. And it's not that hard. You've got your phone with you all the time. Take a picture. Yeah. It's like, oh, I can't. You
Way
can't.
easier for them to do that than log. I mean,
Oh.
I'd like to get an initial chart. So remind, like it's on you guys to remind the front office to make sure your clients, at least initially, have filled out an initial food log. If you want an initial food log to see what kind of refined foods they're eating and how much water they're drinking and things like that. After that, maybe after 60 days or 90 days, you have to fill out a food log again, maybe. But at least take some pictures as you're changing.
Painfully easy.
Yeah, painfully.
And look, you can see.
If they don't send you a picture at 12 o'clock, you're supposed to be eating. Shouldn't you be eating that?
Yeah.
Stuff
Yeah,
like that.
you know, you can do that. Yeah, you can ride them. Some of them harder than others in terms of the accountability part, but you know, they're aware. You make them aware of seeing that. In terms of fasting protocols, easier for some people than others. It works without a doubt. Some people, very simply, don't eat after dinner until breakfast the next day. Can easily be 12 hours. That has a lot of benefit. In general, if they're eating at night, it's not helping them. The idea that you need after dinner was like, well, I should be eating, more times a day to raise my metabolism. Bullshit. That makes no sense, and that's not what they're doing. They're going for other things they shouldn't be eating. So, other things, get the crap out of your house. If there's ice cream in your house and you can't control yourself and you're sleepwalking and eating it, get it out of the house. It's not that complicated. Well, my kids eat it. Well, too damn bad. If you're 50 pounds overweight and you're worried about having a heart attack, tell your kids they can't have the, the drumsticks or whatever, the ice cream shit.
Chances are, if it's in your house, you will eat it.
If it's not there, you won't.
Yeah.
That's a very effective thing to support the fasting, get the stuff out of the house, right? If you have to have it there because your kids are eating or whatever, put it somewhere else where it's, it's out of sight at least. Then I can also have them do fast from the period following dinner up until lunch the next day. That'd be step 2, and that can easily be 16 to 18 hours. Fasting has a great impact on cleansing fat cells, great impact on insulin sensitivity of the digestive system. Does it lower calories for a lot of people? It may, depending on how you execute it. I would prefer then their meals that they do have, let's say lunch and dinner, be larger to compensate for that. But fasting is a simple way to avoid a lot of screw-ups. So let's say if someone's eating 6 meals, let's call that an old model, there's a lot of opportunities to screw up. To eat too much, eat things you're not supposed to. If you confine it to 2 meals, it's a lot easier from a preparatory and execution standpoint. And a lot of people, once they adapt, do really well with energy and quality of life when they're using fasting, to their surprise, because the body's good at that. Well, we were doing that for thousands of years. I mean, we weren't eating 6 times a day, back in the prehistoric age. We're eating once, maybe, and a lot at one time.
But going from 0 to 60 on someone, careful with blood sugar.
Have to be gradual. Have to be gradual.
Yeah.
But the good thing is, let's say somebody's, their blood sugar's all over the place. They're 60 pounds overweight. You don't need to go right into your most aggressive tactics day one to get a good result for them anyway, right? So keep some bullets, for later. The basics will help them quite substantially.
So step 1, get rid of refined foods, clean up quality of food and food hygiene.
Bad stuff out of the house, yes. Food hygiene, I like that. Number 2, making sure the portions are approximate to what you're wanting, and they're being consistent. For, let's set a goal, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it is. Tell them.
Setting initially, before you go into any fasting, are you setting a breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack?
And a lot of them, yes. If I can get 3 meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, probably that would be the focus.
And then MRMS, alpha omega.
Yeah.
Post-workout.
Yeah, and if they're in a hurry to lose body fat, I would have them use the fat reduced day and nighttime. For males or females, especially the executive clientele does a very good job of helping to optimize the hormonal profile. That's very important. If they're not sleeping well.
The fat reduce, something I use from Dr. Serrano, is great for reducing chronic
Yeah, there's a nighttime and a daytime formula.
Daytime is stimulant-based.
Shit, I don't have it with me. So this is something pretty interesting.
Do you need to take both together? Do you opt for one?
I just take the fat at night. I don't take the fat.
No, you can use them independently.
Yeah, I'm very sensitive to stimulants, so
Right.
I don't take the fat.
Right.
I don't take it.
So the nighttime on its own, designed to help people earn a higher quality of sleep. What do we know based on the research? If people sleep well, they eat less carbohydrate, they have less cravings for refined foods, period. So anything I can do to improve their quality of their sleep is going to help them, whether it be an athlete, general population, and it will help the body deal better with stress when you can sleep well. One of the biggest opponents to quality sleep, elevated stress. Their mind's churning. You got a big money executive. They got a lot to think about. So the nighttime formula is designed to help people reduce their stress, transition to restful sleep, and that's something Dr. Serrano played with those ingredients for a long time before he got it right. So what do we find? They wake up feeling much more well rested. Now, if they're used to getting 6 hours of sleep, and they still get 6 hours of sleep, and they wake up feeling more well rested, that tells me the quality of the sleep was better. That's good. I don't need you to sleep 8 hours. Some people genetically don't need to. Most, I think, 7, 8 hours is good. So I'm looking for the quality. If you wake up feeling more well rested, that's what I'm looking for. I don't need you to sleep 9 hours or anything like that. And that's where you're going to see big changes with their body comp, their ability to train, recover, and so forth. It'll also help with mobilization of stored fat as fuel during the sleep phase too. Daytime formula we take twice during the day helps to shut off fat storage receptors. I mean, if you ever have a adult male client says, well, I'm lean all over, I have to lose body fat. Well, they're not as lean all over as they think, but the concentration of their body fat's in their midsection. Why? Genetically, men have a higher density of fat storage receptors in the midsection, women more so in the lower body. Why? Genetic. So when we can shut off those fat storage receptors through a number of mechanisms, proper lifestyle, frequent exercise, things we're doing with diet, lowering stress, the body can then access more of that stored fat as fuel. It's very stubborn, it's hard to access because of those receptors and some other hormonal factors. So the daytime formula does a great job of doing that. In terms of shutting off those receptors, help you get rid of the stubborn body fat. Very difficult for women that drink alcohol in particular to get rid of body fat that's concentrated in the lower body. And they don't like hearing that, but it's a fact. I mean, if they're drinking wine every night, it's going to be very difficult to get rid of body fat in the lower body in particular. Huh?
Alcohol?
Oh, yeah.
What does the lower body, why does it correlate?
So, don't know. But that's what we found. If they're drinking consistently, they will expand, especially with age. The lower body fat, it becomes very, very stubborn. Very hard to get rid of. So the best thing, don't do it. I mean, Yeah, if you're drinking alcohol every night, there's usually some other kind of problem in place.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's a big problem for the population, especially, for, let's say, your executive clientele can afford good wine and they socialize with it, they drink a lot. It's a problem. They got to curb that. What was it? For adult male and female, what was your other question? I'm trying to remember. Other diet rules?
Yeah, just how would you lay out 130 pound or 40 pound woman needs to lose weight versus 190 pound guy or 240 pound guy?
So between
same thing. You would look at maybe going isocaloric, would you, or would you play with carbs a little differently, or would you give them
the higher their stress level, the more sensitive they're going to be to carbohydrate. One.
Higher stress level, you said?
They're going to be more sensitive to carbohydrate because their insulin sensitivity is going to be poor or suboptimal. Okay? Sleep plays a role in that too. Rule 2.
So higher stress, less carbs.
Yeah. Women are more sensitive to calories than men.
Yeah.
However, women can lose body fat faster than men, proportion when you take into account overall body weight. So why a lot of women would complain, I've got to be more careful with my calories. Genetically, they can lose body fat faster relative to their overall body weight than a man
You got to
can.
pay attention to calories.
Correct.
But you already said, but there's a caveat to that. Women can lose body fat at a faster rate,
Yeah.
but they have to pay attention to calories.
Yeah, they're more sensitive to calories. And women probably undereating is a bigger issue than men. Subconsciously want to eat less. So that's where, again, looking at the pictures of the meals is important. So yeah, if I'm going to use breakfast, lunch, and dinner, ideally with a female, I want to go lower on the carbohydrate. For any carbohydrate I do have, I want to focus it during the meals following training, which is another issue. If they're coming here and they're training, that's great. Some women are still very resistant to doing resistance training on a regular basis for whatever reason. But resistance training, the activity does call for more carbohydrate need post-workout. If they're strictly doing cardiovascular stuff, then I would tell them, then your carbohydrate intake should be very low because you're not really burning up a lot of glycogen doing what you're doing with your hamster wheel. And it's just, and a lot of them also create some problems in that the steady state cardio on a consistent basis for women can cause a lot of problems, can make body fat very difficult to lose. I think it's because the body's constantly trying to replenish, because it thinks you're in flight. There could be some stress factors with it. It just doesn't work. They're a lot better off with weight training and then doing energy system, work, sprint intervals and stuff like that. But that's a different thing. But anyway, focus the carbohydrate post-workout. Other meals, unlimited amounts of green vegetables, high protein, high dietary fat. Figure out what portions are right for them. If they feel like they're too overfull when they're eating, then you've got to cut back. Maybe you need to add a meal. If they tolerate it really well, larger meals, then use longer fasted periods.
And be careful with the vegetable. They'll want to fill up on vegetables. Talk about that can bloat them.
Yeah.
That can a lot of good things in vegetables, but don't go from 0 vegetables, fast food to now eat 4 cups of broccoli at dinner. That's going to cause them distress.
Yeah.
I have started clients on a 1/4 cup of vegetables.
It's interesting.
Just a 1/4 cup, because fiber can bloat the stomach, right?
That's a good point.
It's not a healthy one. I've started them at a 1/4 cup at times, 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Some peppers and spinach with your omelet in the morning, a light salad or something at lunch, right? With just the healthy fats, right? Like he's talking about. Post-workout. And the other thing that's least irritant to the stomach for carbs, rice.
Yeah.
Then I go sweet potato after that once they can start digesting a little better. But those 3 meals, I start sometimes, someone's got digestive and bloating issues, I start with only a 1/4 cup of vegetables, and I start adding a little more as they tolerate it a little more, because it can get overwhelming with them. They'll feel like I'm eating healthier, I feel shittier. So be careful with loading the vegetables.
Are you focusing carbs post-workout because for recovery or because they're able to burn them
Both.
faster?
Okay. So the conditions, metabolic and hormonal conditions we create during resistance training make the body respond better to carbohydrate at that time. Why do we want them? Yeah, to a degree you want to replenish glycogen for a performance athlete, not so much for general population, because in actuality, lower glycogen levels can leave stored fat as a more available fuel source. But carbohydrates can also be very helpful for fat burning in that they're anti-catabolic. And for women especially, when they go low carbohydrate for too long, their thyroid tanks. So getting the right amounts of carbohydrates, right timing, right sources, combinations, very important for the hormonal environment to burn body fat. So I do like periods of zero carbohydrate intake, but not longer for 2 to 3 weeks for a female before I need some carb.
Just after when they work out. So even if they do like a 6 a.m. workout and eat breakfast after, you'll have them do their carb intake for breakfast.
Yeah, whenever they're weight training, that post-workout meal is the post-workout meal. Okay. And those conditions are created by the resistance training, so I don't care when it is. Preferably morning, lunch, or early evening. You know, I think that's better than training in the evening and then eating after that. I think it's better to do it earlier in the day if you can.
What do you suggest for people who are like vegetarian? Like for protein sources?
One, what type of vegetarian? Some will eat fish and eggs and seafood. You can work with them. The ones that contain none, I just no. I can't. I just won't do it. I mean, you know, it's just, you know, I tell them, I said, listen, if you're doing this because you think it's trendy and it's going to work, you're wrong. I can win that argument. For some of them ethically that believe vegetarianism is where they need to be, I don't bother. Because they're set on that and they don't want to kill animals to eat them. I do. I'm not going to have that argument.
What about like tofu? Is that not good?
It's going to be highly estrogenic for a lot of them. I think having a lot of soy intake can be problematic. I think a lack of animal protein is going to be problematic. My personal experience is when I have a selection of different people I can work with, if you're a vegetarian, you're a red flag, you're going to be a pain in my ass. It's going to take a lot more work to get you a result. So my philosophy is I'm going to charge you a lot more. And if you don't want to pay that, then you're welcome to go work with somebody else. It's very, very hard with their rules and personality type to get a good result. So some of them, if you know they've been sent to me by somebody that I need to help or somebody I'm friends with, I will try and talk them out of that. Good protein sources.
I mean, you could get protein from like nuts.
You can. It's hard. It's hard to get enough. It's hard to get a critical mass. I think there's also things in animal protein that you can't get elsewhere. When you look at the vitamin profiles, you know, I'm just trying to think, because there was somebody I did deal with not long ago, and I'm trying to remember what I did. You know, collagen protein technically, you know, comes from bones. I mean, so, you know, or cartilage, they're not going to use that. That could work well if somebody was not going to eat protein from animal sources for a while. I mean, if they're going to use dairy proteins as their sole source of protein, they're going to explode. You know, I wish I had something better to tell you, you know.
I mean, I guess the general recommendation.
Don't do it. What? Why? I don't get it. I don't get it. I never will. It's just a clash of philosophies. But at the same time, if you know, some of them saying, well, vegetarian diet, I'm going to get ripped. No, you're not.
Yeah.
It does not work. You know, there could be a few people in the population genetically that it responds well to. I could think of a couple. However, they're also using anabolic steroids, so that's different too. There was a bodybuilder, Bill Pearl, who was vegetarian for a while, but he was using a lot of different steroids that are available to him, so that changed the game quite a bit for him. But if you're not doing that, then you can't take on Bill Pearl's diet and expect to gain some kind of benefit. That happened to work for him.
How important is it to get organic vegetables?
I would prioritize organic and grass-fed protein sources more so than vegetables and fruits. I think it's good, but I think if you wash them real well, you'll gain some benefit there. I think most people can get away without. Most people can get away with that because when you're looking at the protein and dietary fat sources, they're going to store a lot of toxins in the fats. The vegetables and the fruits don't have, you know, much of any dietary fat, so they're not storing it the same. It's like a cow we talked about that swallows the cement chips and the estrogen and the antibiotics. They're going to store that. You're going to get that from those food sources. So yeah, I don't worry too much about that.
What would you say for like the more of like the cultural athlete, like say like Asian or whatever, who has a lot of like, I would say Asian cuisine in their diet that has a lot of like, you know, a lot of bad oils and stuff like that?
When you say bad oils, I'm trying to think.
Like no oils, like they do a lot of cooking with no oils, like with at least Chinese food. And
Oh yeah, you're right. Okay.
So, like, what would you say for that? 'Cause
I would try and use, other oils I would try and use would be coconut oil. I would try and cook a lot of butter, like fried rice with butter, you know, something like that. Coconut oil, avocado oil. I would try and change things up, but you got to be careful. Some of those oils don't do as well at really high temperatures. So yeah, things that are fried in general, or they're using a lot of soy sauce too, can be problematic for some people. Corn oil, I would avoid that like the plague.
And what about like, say if they're eating out to a restaurant where you can't really control?
Don't eat there. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I went to a hibachi place like a couple of years ago. It just happened, whatever, and they wanted to use oil, and I said, "Could you use butter?" He said, "Yeah." So usually they don't care. I mean, if it's accessible to them, they'll do it. But yeah, like a Chinese restaurant. I was at a Chinese restaurant recently, and I asked for things without soy and things without fried in corn oil, and they brought me some separate stuff. They didn't really mind. You know, your average place, I don't know. But yeah, that's a tough one, because those oils will add up to be a problem. Even if it's somebody, let's say it's an athlete, they're not worried about body fat loss, so why do I need to be worried about, you know, eating corn oil? You know, I'm not fat. Because when they're consistently consuming the corn oil, it's going to screw up their stomach. They're going to be able to absorb less nutrients, so that is going to inhibit their ability to grow. So that's the argument, you know, that I would make with them, is that getting off that is important for your whole digestive system.
I'm just like, because for a lot of these Asian families and athletes in general, like eating out at these types of restaurants isn't like, not going there isn't an option, I would say. At least for people that are.
It's a good point. Yeah, try and get them to fry in other oils, I guess. I'm trying to think. Most of them have butter in stock. I'm sure they could do that. Geez, I'm drawing a blank. If I think of something else, I'm trying to remember. I'm just trying to remember. There was an Asian chef that I was helping with something, and I'm trying to remember what else I told him to use, or what he had some other ideas. I'll look it up. So I have some email correspondence. We found some other oils that he could use with his dishes that he found to be pretty good. So let me check that, and I'll get back to you.
What are like common misconceptions you hear about foods that are healthy, that maybe are trendy or something, but really aren't? Or like that?
Yogurt for women.
Oh, okay.
If you're sensitive to dairy, it may be good for what's her name, Jamie Lee Curtis. May not be good for you. That's a common one.
Yeah.
So dairy does not create a great response for everybody.
Wait, so if you're not sensitive to it, doesn't matter though?
I think in general, if you're consuming a lot of lactose, it can be difficult to lose body fat for women. So it's a matter of how much do you get in a certain day. But, you know, I see thousands of diets a year in terms of people emailing what they're doing. A lot of women rely too heavily on yogurt and yogurt products and cheese. I think it's because I don't read, what's the women's magazine?
What are you gonna be for?
Women's health.
No, like, not the fashion ones. You know, the other not tabloids, but other magazines. I think they feature a lot of stuff like
Shape
that.
magazine, like
Because those brands pay for a lot of placement. Those brands pay for, you know, placement of their yogurt, their cheese stuff. So it's in a lot of the articles they see in those magazines. So I think a lot of people assume they're good choices. That'd be my best guess.
If you're not, if you can tolerate it, it's okay in small portions.
Yes.
Okay. What about like non-dairy yogurts, like coconut yogurt or cashew?
That's not a bad idea. I think it depends on the sugar content.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a good idea to rotate those. That's a good idea. Are those good? I haven't tried them.
I don't know. I haven't had them either. I was just curious.
I never have. I think yeah, I've had some people use those pretty well. Uh-huh.
What are signs of like you being intolerant to dairy?
Good question. Top signs. that you are having difficulty with any food source, whether it be dairy or anything else. So let's first classify this. You can be inherently sensitive to certain foods genetically at birth. There's other foods that you eat too often over the course of your life that then cause problems. So let's break them up into those two things. Signs that you're not responding well to a certain food source: bloating, fatigue, joint pain, low energy, difficulty with digestion, sluggishness, lack of motivation, irritability, skin rashes, mental fogginess. Those would be the most common.
But like,
If I notice that, I'm looking at the diet, I'm trying to pick out what are the most common culprits, and I'm eliminating those things. Then I'm tracking the client to see, are they getting better? If they're getting better, we know something we eliminated helped. Where it becomes more difficult is if we've eliminated the common culprits like dairy or refined food source. Tomatoes is a common one, actually. I'm also going to look at in their history something they've eaten very often. I'll look to eliminate that. If all of those things have been eliminated and they're still feeling lousy, then they need a food allergy blood test. And that blood test will then reveal what are the inherent things that they're allergic to, which can be anything. I had my test done not long ago, and I'm allergic to mackerel. I've never eaten mackerel in my life. But so it shows you some interesting things. It showed me some other things that I probably said, yeah, you know what, I've probably eaten that too often. I should probably stop it for a few months. But look at the response and then start eliminating. And what you'll find is the quality of life is going to improve significantly, and so will their body composition will improve. A huge difference in bloating, like what Scott mentioned, that starting off at a gradual amount of green vegetables. Bloating is a big problem. Women are more sensitive to it, than men, but it can make people appear a lot to have a much higher body fat than what's actually true. So it's a quality of life issue too. So if you can eliminate that, you're going to get a lot more buy-in from a client. Now, I like to use also the EZ14 is a digestive enzyme catalyst. So there's 14 ingredients. Some the body makes, some the body doesn't make. If anybody's had a problem responding to their meals, then adding 3 of these with the meal a couple times a day will make a tremendous difference in terms of helping to restore the digestive system to where it belongs. I don't think probiotics work nearly as well as what other people think. Don't see it. I think digestive enzymes are a much more effective choice. And also very helpful for if you have an athlete that needs to gain lean muscle in a hurry. Taking these will also help them tolerate larger portions of quality food and absorb more nutrients, without a doubt. But we know probably after age 35, a large percentage of the adult population has seen a big decline in their natural digestive enzyme production. For a variety of reasons, they need more support. A kid who's 16 years old is probably not going to notice a difference, unless they become really sensitive to something, different ballgame.
But what if you only had like a sign of low energy or fatigue? Like if that
Could be a lot of things.
Yeah.
That could be you didn't sleep well. So what's interesting is when somebody has a problem, they're usually in a combination of those factors, not just one.
Multiple.
Probably.
Most likely one.
Probably. If they have instant stomach upset, that can be a clear sign.
Or like a skin rash or something.
And if you want to know food allergy tests, the blood only, the skin test, nonsense. Garbage science. And there's a website, I think it's foodallergy.com. And some states you can get it without a prescription, some states you need a prescription.
And what are probiotics? Like I see it on like a lot of dairy products and stuff, but I don't even know.
Yeah, they're putting them in all those yogurt products.
Yeah.
What are probiotics? Well, it's a bacteria, right? We naturally have all kinds of bacteria in our bodies.
Right.
And some would argue that things like antibiotics kill off good bacteria over time, and that they need to be replenished with supplementation. I'm not so sure. Maybe in some cases, but if they're using a probiotic, it's probably for a limited period of time to restore something. It's hard. They need to be monitored. Some people have gotten in the habit of using them on a daily basis. I would use digestive enzymes before I would do that, in my opinion. Part 2.
The first step that you'll add in after, if they're on, like, let's say they come to you, I have a wedding, let's say they say 10 weeks, I want to go straight hardcore into whatever, so you'll start them on, like, the caveman, if they're on certain supplies, whatever, and then first you'll add in other color vegetables, and then rice or sweet potato.
I think my approach would be 3 weeks, 0 carbohydrate outside of green vegetables. Then I would add some carbohydrate on day 22, but I'd be careful with the amounts to make sure it was post-training. Then I would repeat the cycle. And I would try and get better at it. So here's the hard thing, You put together a diet. What's the compliance? How well are they doing it? If they send you pictures, you have some idea of what they're eating. You don't know what else they're doing. So the thing that I'm telling a lot of people, at different stages is, let's get better at our execution and focus on that, rather than making a lot of complex changes you can't implement very well. Because when we're doing things like macronutrient cycling, like we're talking about the carbohydrate, it keeps the body very fresh, right? So you don't have to worry about it getting stale. But there's usually significant room for improvement from cycle to cycle with a general population person. And they keep identifying areas that you help them see that they can improve. And consistency is a key. I had this conversation with somebody recently. Out of all the adults in the United States that are setting out to improve their body composition and quality of life this year, January 1, 2022, I would say 90% are going to miserably fail. Why? Maybe more, right? The vicious cycle is the average American gains somewhere between 10 and 20 pounds of body fat during the holiday season, which starts at around what?
That's the average?
I think so. I could be wrong. I thought I read that recently. But how many of them then lose that over the subsequent 6 months? Not many. They may lose some muscle, but so it's a vicious cycle where you're seeing the adult population gain in obesity. So my point is, why are they failing? From the outset, they have the wrong approach. They're lacking information. And when they try that approach, it miserably fails, then they lose all hope and go back to their bad habits. But even for people that do get good advice, like a lot of good things that you can tell them we talked about today, a very small percentage will execute consistently without someone to hold their feet to the fire in a lot of ways. Yeah, that is the reality, so there's always room for improvement in terms of execution, but consistency, I tell people all the time, during the holiday season, the body gets very good at storing fat with all the things you're doing, more sugar intake, more alcohol intake, whatever you're doing. Well, it also takes time for the body to reverse those trends and get to be good at burning body fat too. So if you're doing the right things,
behavior change.
Yeah.
Behavior changes.
But something I tell a lot of people very often, in month 2 or 3 of a system doing it the right way, you're going to see better results than the first month as the body gets better at burning fat. Now that's an inverse relationship to what a lot of people are conditioned to, because they see lose 100 pounds in 4 weeks with whatever bullshit people are peddling. Can you lose 10 pounds in 3 weeks? Oh yeah, body fat, I've seen it happen a lot. That's a moniker that I put out very often. That can, especially if somebody has a high amount of body fat. But what they really should be thinking is incrementally, am I earning success consistently over a period of time? And that adds up. 1. Now, what happens after 12 weeks that I've reached my goal? And this is a really crazy kind of thought process people have, is why should I put all this effort into losing body fat when I'm going to gain it right back? Well, why do anything? But the way you answer that is, if you do it correctly, your body's in a position where it's going to be a lot easier to maintain that success because your fat cells are working well, your hormones are working well, you've established certain habits, and yes, it will take effort just to stay the same. You know, there's a saying that, what's that?
Their behavior has changed.
Yeah, that's a big part, but you know, it takes effort even to maintain your success, right? We're not either getting better or worse, you know, at any given time. Staying in the middle is hard.
So talk about muscle gain a little bit.
Okay.
So like what we were talking about.
All right.
We started talking about, say we go through
You want to gain some muscle, huh?
We go through this 2 times, we leaned out. Now where do you go?
Okay. It's a good question. Adult male, early 30s.
32 years old.
You're 32?
180 pounds.
You know, look a day over 31. Okay. So the question is, when we go through a cycle specifically to lose body fat, what should our approach be to maximize lean muscle following while keeping our body fat levels low? Okay. When you use the correct approach and optimize insulin sensitivity, it becomes a lot easier to gain muscle with less carbohydrate than it was before. So that being the case, being that I need less carbohydrate to peak insulin and so forth, let's say post-workout during that muscle growth phase, a lot easier for me to keep my body fat levels low. I would continue with the approach of caveman type of approach in terms of food choices. I might expand the number of meals. You know, for certain people, if that fits their lifestyle, I'm going to pay very close attention to post-workout nutrition. So let's talk about that.
Talk about what that window is to timing.
3 hours.
Looking at 3 hours.
3 hours, approximately. So, but I can expand that. So here's what I like to do for a young stud like you to maximize lean muscle mass and stay lean. First, post-workout. Okay, so pre and post-workout, I'm using 100% MR muscle synthesis powder as we discussed pre and post-workout. A half hour after the workout, post-workout meal 1. That is going to be leaner proteins because I want a faster absorption. Let's talk cage-free chicken, seafood, fish, wild-caught eggs are good sources. They're quickly absorbed. And they're not necessarily low-fat. Salmon's a good one. They're not necessarily low-fat. They're just a little easier to absorb as they're higher monounsaturated fat. Their saturated fat's a little lower. So it's going to digest faster than a steak. I'm going to use a lot of monounsaturated fat from extra virgin olive oil and avocado. And carbohydrate sources, rice and potatoes work really well. So maybe that's an isocaloric meal. Okay? Biggest meal, you know, of the day.
Around 30 minutes post-workout.
30 minutes post-workout, because that gives the 100% MR and muscle synthesis powder enough time to do their job with the blood flow in the muscles. So remember, when you eat, you're diverting blood away from the muscles into the stomach to assist with digestion. No bueno, right? That's not optimal at that time. Post-workout meal 2, more anabolic, more saturated fat, lower carbohydrate. What are we trying to accomplish? We are trying to keep insulin levels peaked for a longer period of time in terms of their anabolism. Much different than spiking the insulin with a bunch of garbage carbohydrate like fake sugars, which is going to create some residual problems. So post-workout meal 2, grass-fed steak, big one. Maybe a smaller amount of carbohydrate, maybe 30 or 40 grams of rice, grass-fed butter, very high saturated. Maybe some vegetables with it. That's the post-workout meal 2. Both of those meals I'm using alpha omega M3. Why? Help to drive carbohydrates into hungry muscles instead of spilling over into fat cells. Very powerful macronutrient partitioning agent. How does the body put shit in different places that I want it to help me grow, or alternatively in the wrong direction to make me gain fat? So is carbohydrate bad? No, but it has a lot to do with how your body responds from a hormonal standpoint and where it ultimately puts it. More muscle, I got more room for glycogen. There's also glycogen in my liver, which stays pretty stable, right? That's for emergencies. But, you know, that's why people that gain more muscle, I think, can stay a lot leaner for a lot of reasons. They have a larger calorie burning engine, but they also have a bigger glycogen tank, right? So you do that, young man. When I come back in March, you'll be significantly significantly more muscular.
Where we can coax the body to start using glucose, carbohydrates, fats, protein, amino acids, and to go where we want it to go. Left randomly, it's going to go some shit.
Well, you know, when you talk about signaling, right? If my diet's a bunch of shit, the signaling's no good, the messaging's no good, the body's confused. What is it going to partition? You know, it just doesn't respond well, you know, to that. And that's a prime argument I make to any nutritionist who hate me. That your idea that calories dictate what's going on is complete and utter nonsense. If you want to tell me that 100 calories of broccoli and 100 calories of Captain Crunch cereal are the same thing, you are a moron. You are a complete moron. Yes, they're both carbohydrate. Yes, they're the same number of carbohydrates. One is inert, right? Broccoli. Another one is going to spike your blood sugar. It's providing a refined element that's going to screw up digestion. It's going to have a negative impact on fat cells and go on and on.
No micronutrients?
No, it has no value whatsoever. It's the perfect material to store fat. Breakfast cereal by itself. Don't add milk because, you know, that would slow it down a little bit. So the breakfast cereal by itself, I mean, it's like you had a contest to, you know, be obese or something. That would be the diet, the breakfast cereal for all your meals. I don't think you could find anything better.
Yeah, to promote fat and obesity, Cool. Any other questions, guys? Thanks, Scott.
You're welcome. Thank you.
It really helps everybody start framing what they need to start looking at with it. And why, right? Why? Just going to, like he said, calorie, oh, it's 100 calories, it's a cup of cereal, or it's a broccoli. That's basic fucking kindergarten math. And if you think you're going to apply basic kindergarten math to a human body,
That's a guy. I like
you're
that.
fooling yourself.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Look, the key is make things as complicated as possible. No. You got to look at who you're dealing with and see how complicated you can make it for what they need. Some people who are in a big rush are going to be more motivated to take on more details.
Yeah.
A young kid that comes through here and I see these guys, these space cadets, they're not going to be able to handle a whole lot of detail. You're going to have to be patient with them, and you're going to have to be gradual and take the wins where you can get them. And, you know, it's a body of work. And gradually, you know, improve it. You know, the adult clientele, compliance is an issue because they like to eat out. You know, you've got to solve problems for them before it becomes a huge problem for you.
Yeah.
As if they're not renewing, you know, right? They give up.
Just remind me, did we say for, you know, an executive guy that's a little stressed out, eating out all the time, skipping breakfast, that you would start him probably protein, fat meals at breakfast.
So, okay, so let's...
He works out at 5 o'clock.
That's a good one. Let's look at this scenario. Adult male, executive, high stress. Let's say he has on the stress scale, that's one of the things on a questionnaire I'm always going to ask. What's your stress level? How do you sleep? Score it on a scale of 1 to 10. If they're telling me a 7 or higher, I know I'm dealing with a little bit of a different animal, and I have to help their body respond better to stress. I'm not going to eliminate it because in a lot of cases it's a marital issue, a family issue, or a job issue.
But you don't fix those problems?
Can't tell them to quit their... I did have once had a guy, he's extremely a very wealthy guy. I told him, just quit. I said, what would happen if you walked away? He says, well, I have people, you know, that I've been training fulfilling the job. I said, well, if this is this important for you to get your health in order, step away for 6 months. And he kind of did. He didn't completely, but it did help. But most people aren't in a position to do that. So you have to be realistic. So one of the first things I'm going to tell them is your stress is not something I created, right? You're going to be a lot more sensitive to carbohydrate. I have to deal with it. That's the reality. You're seeking out a lot of carbohydrate to comfort yourself, soothe yourself, and do whatever. So we're going to go with them very low carbohydrate right out of the gate. We might use some carbohydrate post-training. And that is actually a good tool to actually get them to train because they want to eat, right? So they make that connection. Because busy people always have 1,000 excuses as why they can't weight train. Well, I had a call. You know, so it is something that helps a lot there. I like fasting with them as well. When they're busy, that's good because they're thinking about eating a little less. They can get more work done earlier. That is an advantage of being a very busy executive type. I don't like to count calories with them. I want a high amount of protein, dietary fat. I want them to feel full with their meals. And we'll find they were doing so much wrong when they started that making these simple choices will begin to bring on a very good result. the training also makes them feel a lot better. You know, maybe it raises their anabolic hormones. They feel more manly again. They feel like they're in more control. You know, for a lot of these people, even when they're very successful, it's like the weight of the world is on them on a daily basis for a variety of reasons. So it's a way to help the body cope with stress. But you have to be careful not to overtrain them, because their capacity to recover is going to be diminished in a lot of cases too.
So what does that look like, guy getting up at 5 a.m. to, you know, start
Sorry,
work?
who is this? What do you say? I don't pay a lot of attention to him. What? Get up at 5:45? Ideally, I like them training in the morning, because with their busy schedules, I know they can get it done before a lot of things start to happen. So ideally, if I can get them training, and then I would have them eat breakfast after. Then I might have a fasting approach where they eat breakfast and then fast all the way up until dinner. That's an easy thing to do when you're training first thing in the morning. Breakfast is going to be pretty big, things we talked about, you know, cage-free eggs, cooked in butter, not in the oil. Whole eggs, that's something, you know, well, should I eat whole eggs or yolks bad? Yolks are not bad for you. You know, the dietary fats are good, they're quite filling there. We can rotate between a lot of different organic breakfast meats. We can use some vegetables there. They can be kind of carnivorous there. You don't necessarily need a carbohydrate source. We're using the alpha mega M3. We're using the EZ14 because when they're stressed, their digestion is also going to have problems. So the digestive enzymes make them feel a ton better. They feel better. They're a lot more likely to exercise, have a higher quality of life. That's worth a lot of money to them. Midday, I'll have them use, in a lot of cases, muscle synthesis powder and 100% MR, and here's why. One, I want to help recovery. Two, I want to give them something they're going to drink to make sure they get some water in addition to whatever coffee they're drinking. But the muscle synthesis powder in particular, on a theoretical basis, based on the composition of the free form amino acids, mimics food. And as a result, they can make the brain believe a lot of foods come in. As a result, metabolic rate can increase, but there's nothing to burn except stored fat, because the amino acids themselves have no caloric burden. So I found that to work very well during fasting to enhance fat burning, help them feel better. Dinner, grass-fed beef, a lot of vegetables, more extra virgin olive oil, as much as they want to eat. You know, if they want to eat 2 steaks, that's fine. Most of them will start to modify their diet a little bit. But if they're training and they're eating big, they're going to gain some muscle and they're going to lose some body fat. So one of the first things I tell them, if you gained 4 pounds and you're doing what I told you, then you're gaining muscle. That's a good thing, right? And I tell a lot of them, you know, you shouldn't be weighing yourself more often than maybe once a month. It doesn't mean anything. I'd much rather than do a body comp test, you know, every 4 to 6 weeks. That's going to give us a lot more information. But in a lot of cases, those male stressed clients will gain muscle and lose body fat at the same time, which is a good thing for them, you know, long term. And they're going to look a lot better. So don't be surprised if they gain some weight initially. That's not necessarily body fat. It's usually muscle there. And then not eating after dinner. Those are the type also they're going to have a lot of problems with cravings, things like that. Get all the shit out of the house, you know. And look, I'm not there. I don't know what's going on, but you know, a lot of them have done it, or they tell whomever does their shopping not to buy it. It helps, without a doubt. I mean, it takes much more of a conscious decision to go out in your car and then go drive to the grocery store and then buy something, rather than it being like a foot in front of you and easy access, right? You know, kind of like an alcoholic, right? You wouldn't want all that available. Fat reduced nighttime, very effective for the executive clientele, so they can shut off and just kind of transition to sleep. Better sleep, feel better in the morning, a lot more likely to work out, make good choices at breakfast, get the day off to a good start. They're building momentum. That's the mindset. Very different than somebody who has a lot more free time. You know, you know, just an experience knowing how they think. Weekends, they have more time. I might do a little bit more with training to keep them occupied. Sometimes it helps a lot with them avoiding a lot of the bad food situations. Maybe it could just be, you know, maybe they're training on Saturday and Sunday, but also maybe they're doing some walking around or some other kind of physical activity rather than sitting on the couch, where they're a lot more likely to do something to screw them up. They tend to respond well to that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be back in March unless he tells me not to come. It's like,
All right.
So I told him, and he's like, as I said, should I come back in March? He's like, yeah, maybe not. Yeah. Some point.
One more thing.
Sure.
What would you say, like, I don't know if you went over this yesterday, but like, we went over this like all throughout, but like, if you're like just meeting with a client who's like male, pretty overweight, like, what would you say, like, what are the basics of the benefits of like not having a lot of carbs in your diet?
Okay. Here's how I would explain it to just about anybody. If they're wanting to lose body fat, why use a low carb approach? Stored carbohydrate in the muscles is called glycogen. Okay? Perfectly normal. When that's available, the body likes to burn it. It's a very easily accessible fuel source. When I use a low carbohydrate diet, or let's call it a zero carbohydrate diet outside of green vegetables, my glycogen will deplete with my exercise and daily activity. When my glycogen levels are depleted, the body can then seek to burn at proteins or fats because the carbohydrate's absent, right? So if I play my cards right with how I'm doing things with nutrition and scientifically engineered supplementation, the body can transition to using stored fat much more easily. That is a main point, right? You tell them you are switching your fuel sources. By starving the body of carbohydrate, make it burn more fat. Insulin is the body's most potent fat storage hormone. Perfectly normal. We don't want to eliminate it. One of the principal agents for increasing insulin levels is carbohydrate. Dietary fats also can increase insulin levels too. But a combination of carbohydrates, especially refined ones, maybe the saturated fat you're getting in a McDonald's burger, sends insulin through the roof, puts you in a fat storage situation. So if I were to say the average overweight male in most cases is going to have some sort of an insulin problem being elevated consistently, and we need to solve that. One, need to solve how the body's using fuel sources too. That's where I would focus on explaining to what you're talking about. Those would be the principal things that they can understand. You may also say, if they're eating a lot of refined carbohydrate, that's also negatively impacting their digestive system, which is limiting their body's ability to lose fat too, in a indirect way, let's call it. Because if they're not digesting well, the body's having to use a lot of resources to help with digestion, as opposed to burning fat. Use those three. If they don't respond well to that, they're wasting your time. They don't want an answer. And there are people like that. That they may want to flirt with the possibility of making changes, but then they want to argue their way out of it, or something like that, and that's a hard one to deal with. Anything else? Okay, good, I'm tired.